This is the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. Here's your host, Cory Tusick.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. On this week's episode, I talked to Shinobi. Shinobi is a well-known personality in the Bitcoin space on Twitter. His Twitter handle is @BrianTrolls. I wanted to talk to him about privacy, some of the technical aspects of Bitcoin, and then we also talk about Taproot, with Taproot getting activated this past week. I wanted to talk to him about that and what Taproot does, what it is, and what it means and why it's important. We also talked about his background and how he was just working in a warehouse, chucking boxes around, and discovered Bitcoin, and now is full-time into Bitcoin. And we talk about getting the importance of getting self-sovereign in this current political climate. So talked about all that. I really appreciated him coming on. I hope you guys enjoy it. The sponsor for the show is Coinbase Connect. Do you have questions about Bitcoin? Personalize your learning and book a one-on-one video call with a Bitcoin pro on Coinbase Connect. Learn about mining, security, the Lightning Network, DeFi, taxes, and many other topics. It's really easy. Choose your topic and pro, select a date when you're available, and bring your questions to the meeting room. Book your first call today by going to Coinbase.com and clicking on the Connect tab. Be prepared for the financial revolution and get the knowledge you need. It's also brought to you by Movies Plus. It's my streaming platform. Just go ahead and check it out. Download it in the app stores. Any app store, just search Movies Plus. And then if you want to look at it on the web, it's mymoviesplus.com. But yeah, find it in the app store. You can sign up for a free trial. We've got Bitcoin content up there, going up there. And then we also have Christmas content and everything. So hope you guys, check it out. And we're adding thousands of titles. So lots of stuff going on there, and check it out. So if you want to follow me, my Twitter handle is @Cory_Tusick, and the show email is bitcoinmadesimplepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks. So you're taking a morning constitutional?
Yep. Part of the morning habit, get the coffee, sit down for constitutional, and gotta stay regular.
Well, it's funny because I didn't know if you meant that or if you meant like going for a walk, because isn't that one of the terms for constitutional?
Actually,
if you're okay with me talking about this on the podcast.
I don't give a shit.
I appreciated the openness though. But yeah, so thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. And your NIM Shinobi, I want to get into that a little bit, but do you stay NIM purely for security? Because I just had Gigi on, and he was talking about how he does it, for security, but also it's fun for him because then he goes to like conferences, and like he was talking to Guy Swan for like 30 minutes, and then he was like, "Oh, by the way, I'm Gigi," and he was like, "What?" So do you do it strictly for security, or is it also for humoring yourself and all that?
No, pretty much just security. I just don't want my name and face tied to everything. And every time I've tried to pull that at a conference or something, I get recognized by my voice in like 5 seconds. It's obnoxious. Like I need to really like find a realistic like fake tone of voice to use, because everybody just calls it in like a couple seconds.
I was gonna say your voice is not that Gigi's isn't distinct and others. Laser Hodls, I feel like if I talk to him in real life, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, this is you." But yours, your voice is pretty recognizable. So you're not like against people finding out who you are when you're at a conference or anything like that.
Nah, I mean, as long as my face isn't being put up on the internet and shit.
Are you on the internet I guess, have you ever been on the internet? Or have you scrubbed yourself completely?
Nope, never did any of the normie things that everyone else does. No Facebook, no nothing.
You're lucky. I had to, my listeners know, but I had to like, whenever I was distributing, God forbid, distributing a movie about Donald Trump, not supporting him, just fulfilling a service for a client. I was like Facebook was saying I was trying to influence the election, and stuff like that. So I had to I just deleted Facebook completely at that point. I didn't even use it
Wait a
anymore,
minute. Wait, you as an American citizen are exercising your First Amendment right to influence an election? Oh my God. How shocking. I mean,
know.
I guess the entire media establishment should be shut down, right?
Yeah,
No, can't do that.
they can't. It seems like they're always, I've seen these ads before that said, paid for by the, Biden administration, paid for by the Trump administration. And I'm like, huh, I thought they were influencing it. Meanwhile, here I had a client come to me from movie, and I was like, well, you know what, this would make, like, if I advertise this on Facebook, it would do really well amongst, Trump supporters. Um, and they were like, they needed like documentation. They wanted my IDs and everything. And I was like, no. I was like, no, I'm not.
For posting a movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, I'm not giving you any information. And that really spooked me into like that's what probably started me down the Citadel thinking. I was already into Bitcoin at that point, but then it kind of opened my eyes to like, oh my God, this is a much bigger problem than just, you know, monetary expansion, and debasing your currency. This is a privacy thing that I need to take seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, at that point, my face had already been out there. There was articles with my name in it. Hence why when I started the podcast, I was like, well, I can't really do a NIM at this point. Such is life. So here I am just telling everybody who I am and making myself public. I wish I could do Shinobi on the other hand. So Shinobius monk is your what you chose to NIM yourself after. Good.
Honestly, that was kind of a joke that came later. I just have a habit of taking monkey and adding things to it for pseudonyms. It was originally actually Ninja Monkey, and then I changed it to Shinobi. I don't even remember why. And then Shinobius Monk was just kind of like riffing that to another degree, like Thelonious Monk, the jazz artist.
So it just keeps getting more. I mean, you're like basically 3 degrees removed from anybody knowing who you are because you've taken your NIM and shredded it and keep going further away from reality.
I mean, like while I had the Norm avatar, I was like changing my name every day. I was kind of just fucking people.
Did you ever get to watch that Norm clip? I don't know if I sent it to you or not. I'll have to send it. Dude, it's so good. Where it's the professor of
Actually, no, I didn't, and I'm going to do that the instant that I get off this call.
It's so good. It's so good. So yeah, let's get on Norm for a second. Because your profile was Norm up until probably like a week ago. Ever since he died. So you're a big Norm fan? Norm Mcdonald, for those that don't know what we're talking about.
Oh yeah, dude. He is like one of the few celebrities in this day and age who was an actual genuine person. Like he did not just get up on stage or in front of a camera and like put on this fake persona or like tailor his behavior, what he said just to be like popular or cater to what viewers wanted. No, he just got in front of the camera and you got raw Norm Macdonald. And like that is just such a rare thing in this day and age, in this culture. Like that is something that should be acknowledged and respected. Like to actually get to that point. Yeah, it's like to get to that level of fame and celebrity and still just genuinely be yourself. Like that should be applauded.
Yeah. Yeah. He's one of the greats in his stories. I mean, when he goes on a rant, what was you guessed it, what was the joke he always did on SNL when he was doing the weekend update? And it was who was he making fun of?
Vince Foster. Yeah, dude, like all of those riffs were like the most amazing thing ever. Like that and like the constant calling OJ Simpson a murderer that eventually got him fired.
He said, like, in other news, murder in California is now legal. And he was
Oh man.
specifically told ahead of time that if he brought up anything about it, that he was going to get fired. And he was like, ah, whatever, fire me,
Yep.
go on with my life. um, so I want to get a little bit about your background and get into your Bitcoin origin story. But like, what do you do? What's your trade and all that kind of stuff. So for listeners that don't know, I think I have an idea, but yeah, get
Well,
into it.
honestly, just obsess over Bitcoin. When I was employed, believe it or not, I worked in warehouses and shit. Like I have no
Nice.
formal technical education. I have never worked in any kind of like software engineering like job or capacity ever. Like everything I know about those types of topics, I have just taught myself.
Wow.
Like I was a guy in a warehouse chucking boxes.
And so you taught yourself everything, and now you're a software engineer, and do you do everything with Bitcoin?
No,
Are
I
you a
mean,
core dev or?
I I would not call myself a developer or engineer at all. Like I would say that I have a very decent layman's or like slightly deeper understanding of things or aspects of how like software works, how just the general engineering works. I'm not actually a programmer. Like I would probably struggle to write a basic Bitcoin wallet in Python.
Mm. Well, you know what those things even mean, so you're ahead of like 99% of the people out there. Because it's a it's a crazy world. But so that perspective then allows you to understand things like, when people talk about like the privacy and everything like that. I've heard you kind of not attack it, but like, you know people think that like Bitcoin is like super secure and private and we don't have to worry about anything right now. But I've heard you kind of, make sure everybody's like standing at the gates ready to protect it. So what do you see as weaknesses?
Well, I mean, in this day and age, nobody for the most part is getting their hands on Bitcoin without having their name tagged to it.
Yeah.
And in order to really disconnect things on chain, like it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of understanding. Like, Bitcoin by default is pseudonymous. It is not anonymous. Like it's not private. You actually have to put work in order to use it privately. And I feel like most people are just not doing that. And,
Yeah.
kind of just a little tangent that really bugs the shit out of me
Go for it.
is the tool to actually like do that, to actually interact with Bitcoin privately. So many people get scared away from using them just because of tribal like bitch fits between the different teams developing those tools, just flinging mud at each other, trying to capture all of the user base.
Mm.
It's really just disappointing to me because that is one of the most important things about this system. Like people need to understand, first of all, how to use it privately. And they need to be able to trust the tools to do that when the time comes that they actually have to do that for whatever personal or situational reason they would need to.
Hmm.
And I think it like there is a piss poor job of that being done because rather than just explaining abstractly how to do it and showing people all of the tools available, it's just this tribal game of my tool is the best and everybody's just trying to run up at people and shove that tool in their face and then start screaming about why all the other tools are broken and useless instead of like actually explaining the trade-offs between them.
I see. So instead of everybody working together, we're kind of getting pushed into camps based
Mm-hmm.
on different protocols instead of doing what's for the best, which is really just teaching people, walking them through how to actually do this privately. It's funny because, people talk about, like the privacy of Bitcoin, and then, you point out, like, it is by nature like there is a pseudonym that goes with your address. And it's, stamped on the blockchain forever. So how do you get around that?
Like obscuring the connections. Like everybody can see, like when a transaction hits chain, what is being spent, where it's going. So you have to introduce ambiguity to that. Like if you see a transaction that spends one coin and it sends a little bit, to this address, and then all the rest goes back to another one, somebody just made a payment. Like that's very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
You have to obscure where that is going, like create ambiguity. Like if, let's say there's 5 different outputs of, balanced amounts, all broken up. Now that's a little bit ambiguous. Like which of those is a payment? Which of those is the change coming back to the person making those payments? Like who did all of those payments go to? Like you have to create that ambiguity so that it's not so obvious to the observer.
So in other words, to the on-chain analysts or anybody that would want to be tracking that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you're not a fan of the on-chain analytics then?
I mean, definitely not, but that was always going to happen.
Yeah. So then, I mean, do you use something like, obviously you lost all your Bitcoin in a boating accident, and so did I, but would you recommend to somebody, and whatever you have left cash wise, you just put into blimps? That's an inside joke for those that don't know. Would you recommend like CoinJoin and or what is the safest way to keep yourself anonymous and keep it private?
Well, I mean, CoinJoin is really the only widely used tool available right now. But there is a wallet, Mercury wallet, that just got released by a company called Commerce Block. And this actually implements something called a state chain, which is kind of like, think of it like a lightning channel, except instead of being between 2 like defined people, and that's it, you can kind of pass the ownership of that channel around completely off chain. And they've actually implemented coin swap on top of that state chain. So like instead of coin joining where everything is obviously a single transaction, like being all jumbled together to confuse people, you are swapping coins without directly like tying those together in a single transaction. And so like that is a very new tool that can also be used to kind of like open a state chain and then swap that state chain around with, everybody's different state chains, and then eventually close it out and kind of achieve like a similar level of obfuscation to a coin join. But I think the biggest things to mention there are the nature of a state chain is one of the key holders is the operator of like that state chain backend. So you do kind of have to trust whoever's doing that not to collude with like a past owner to defraud the current one. So that is something to consider. But the other thing, kind of a positive, in a high fee environment, all of this is happening off chain. So you can kind of just pay a fee once to open that, and you can swap around to your heart's content until you want to close it out without paying those on-chain fees. So that down the line is a potential way to offer, these privacy tools to people who might not necessarily have the money to constantly be paying fees on chain.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that as another solution. And so this is separate from the Lightning Network then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
like one day it could potentially be plugged into and interoperate with the Lightning Network, but that is a long ways off.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Well, so I want to circle back to before because there's more privacy and like a lot of new things like Taproot and all that. But um, so how did you first hear about Bitcoin? And like what was your first touch point with it, and how did you get into it?
Um,
Is this a good or bad
so
question?
I read the first Slashdot article in 2011.
Nice.
Read the abstract of the white paper, and then went, "This is the stupidest internet scam I've ever heard of," and didn't pay attention to it until like 2013.
As Bitcoiners by nature, I think, are going to be the earlier the adopter you are, the more skeptical you're going to be of things like that. So you're just like, this is stupid. And like read through, but you actually read through it. You didn't just look at a headline and say, well, obviously that's a scam.
Yeah, I mean, like my first thought was literally just like, okay, I'm cool, but the government makes money. Nice internet scam. Goodbye.
The government's the only place that can make money. Nobody else can make it. Where are we gonna get
I mean,
those
yeah,
nice, clean, crisp dollar bills? You can't. So that was your initial touch point. You were like, and then what made you circle back in 2013?
just the fact that it like 10x'd in price. And then I was like, okay, something has to be happening here, because if this was just a internet scam like the Nigerian prince crap, this would not be happening like this. So I like
Yeah.
went back and kind of dove a little deeper and was like, okay, maybe there is something here. Um, let's get my hands on a little bit and see how this goes.
And then so you made that initial maiden voyage into purchasing Bitcoin, and then here you are spending all your time. I assume this is what you do full time, right? Is nothing but Bitcoin,
Pretty much.
and other than maintaining that boat that you wrecked, and trying to get it back up and running. So I
Well,
gotta
how else am
ask.
I going to get back out on the lake so that I can dive down and try and find my keys?
Yeah, I mean they're down there somewhere, right? Now, if I try and guess where you're from, is that doxing you too much?
No, I've been pretty open about it.
Are you from Chicago?
Yep. First guess.
Okay. With I one time heard you talk about mayor, you're the lovely mayor of Chicago, and I was like, that sounds like somebody that lives there.
Who? Beetlejuice?
She's a little crazy. Um, uh, so does that mean you're a Cubs or White Sox fan?
Uh, honestly, not really a sports fan, but there was a an existential war in my childhood where my dad would constantly take me to Sox games because he's
Hmm.
a Sox fan, and his best buddy would constantly take me to Cubs games because he was a Cubs fan. And they constantly warred over which team I should be a fan of.
And then you ended up being not a sports fan.
Yep.
I'm having a hard time in the Bitcoin world finding people fans that are fans of the sports ball still. Because a lot of people they're like, oh yeah, I used to be, but Bitcoin kind of took over, and you know, all of a sudden everything else lost its flavor. I don't know. I guess. Um, is that what kind of happened to you? Like, were you a fan at one point, or like bigger fan? It's at one point, then Bitcoin kind of just took
I
over.
mean, I always liked playing sports, but like watching them, it was just always boring as hell. Like half the times I went to baseball games when I was a kid, I would just go wander around the stadiums and like try to sneak into areas that I wasn't supposed to be in, just because watching the game was just boring.
Well, baseball, as much as I do love baseball, you're excused there because if if you're not there for the relaxed environment and just casually watching the game, yeah, it's pretty boring. Um, okay, so I got to ask you about Taproot, because I mean we'd been trying to do this for a while, but with Taproot activating, I was like, I got to talk to you about it. Um, what are your? How could you? Can you easily explain it to people that would be stupid like myself and not understand it? Even though I had Guy Swan on in like May to explain it to me, and I still like have to go back and refer to notes to understand it. Um, so what
All
is a
right. Well,
Taproot?
so when you make a Bitcoin transaction, there is the Bitcoin script. So like the input to a transaction, it says you have to give me a signature that matches this public key. And when you make that transaction, you have the output that has like the new script with the new public key. And after that gets confirmed, um, now to spend that, you'll need a signature for that public key. Well, that script can do other things. Like it can require like the pre-image to a hash, like an HTLC with Lightning. Or it can say, um, you can't spend this coin until block 800,000.
Mm.
But now what it can also do is it can do like an if else statement, like a normal computer program. Like you can make a script that says, give me the signature for this public key, or after like 5 days, give me a signature for this different public key. And either of those ways to spend it is a valid way. But the problem is, if you try to make a bunch of like OR branches or like other ways to spend that coin, that's going to be a very big output. And it's going to be very expensive to send money to it. And it's going to be very expensive to spend it later. So what Taproot does is all the different ways you can spend the coin, it just makes a Merkle tree out of it. And it commits to that Merkle tree in the output. So
Okay.
that way, if you want to go use those other ways to spend the coin, you just take that one way and the Merkle branch that goes all the way to the root, and then you fulfill the condition. So like if it's a time lock and then a signature, you wait till the time lock expires, you give it that signature. And that way, you can have a lot more varied ways to spend a coin without running into that problem of like this transaction and that output is going to be incredibly massive and expensive, because you just use that Merkle branch for the one way that you're spending it. And that's all that ever has to be put in the blockchain, instead of like the entire script with like all the different ways that it could be spent.
Okay, so basically to get it off chain, it's just one script, and then in that script contains what everything else it can branch off and do.
Yeah.
If
And then instead of having to put the whole thing on chain, you just use the Merkle tree, and like that branch to whatever like spending condition you're using, that's the proof that it's valid, because it's a Merkle tree just like a Bitcoin block.
Okay, and now explain. I think I know, but maybe not, because I'd never try to assume that I know things. Explain the Merkle tree to the audience who's probably wondering what in the hell is a Merkle tree.
Well, I mean, just imagine you have like 8 pieces of data. You hash all 8 pieces of data, and then you break it into pairs. And then you take, a pair of things and you hash those together. And you keep doing that until you have one hash at the top of it, the root of the Merkle tree. And that way you can kind of pick any one of those pieces of data, and then you follow it up to the root. And all you need in order to prove it's part of that tree is like the hashes that make up the path from that piece of data all the way to the root. Like you don't actually have to show the entire Merkle tree,
Of everything
just the part
else.
of it from that piece all the way to the top.
So almost like if you were looking at like a family tree, and like say I'm looking at like my great grandparents up here, and then there's all these other things that have broken off from it down, um, to prove that I am a descendant of my, one great grandparent, instead of having to explain all the other, second, third cousins, aunts, uncles, everything else. Um, it just shows like, okay, from me to my dad to his mom to my great grandpa. Like, and that's all the
Yeah,
information you
exactly.
need. Okay. Um, so then how does this help? I mean, does this reduce the size then of data that needs to be
Yeah,
held by the nodes, or?
it reduces the amount of data that has to go into the blockchain. So like this is a kind of an important detail about Taproot. Um, when you make this Merkle tree of all the different ways you can spend it, you kind of have to keep a copy of that the
Mm,
same way that you have to keep a copy of like all your data on the Lightning channel. You know
mm,
what I mean? Because
mm-hmm,
like the all of those spending conditions, the whole tree is not in the output that is using it. Like just the commitment at the very top of the tree is. So if you lose that data, you're not going to be able to use any of those ways to spend it. Like you have to keep it so that when you go to spend it using one of those Merkle paths, you actually have it to submit to the blockchain. And
mm,
so that allows a lot of space savings for complicated contracts on chain. But you have that trade off of like now you have to keep this data safe and not lose it. Like you can't just regenerate that from your word seed like you would with your private keys.
I see. So yeah, so you have to, so you're not storing that data on chain anymore, but you're moving it to your node, basically.
I mean, I wouldn't say your node, I'd say your wallet, but
Mm,
yeah,
mm-hmm.
you're kind of pulling it off chain and you have to store it yourself until you actually like go to use it and spend those coins.
Okay. Now, in your view, what is the main benefit to this? I mean, I'm sure there's multiple things we can get into, and at its simplest form, slowing down or taking data off chain. But what's the main benefit you see?
Well, first is privacy. Like if you have a coin locked up to a complicated contract between a bunch of people with all these different ways that it can be spent, nobody knows that until it gets spent one of those ways. So that's a huge improvement in terms of not showing people what you're doing on chain.
Mm,
And the other one is just like smart contracts can be way bigger. Like there are actually like size limits for a script or for a transaction that limit like how many different ways of spending a coin you can lock a UTXO up to. And so now with Taproot and using this Merkle tree trick, you can have a coin that has way more different ways to spend it than you could before. So you can make things a lot more expressive. Like instead of being limited to like, these are not going to be accurate numbers. But like, let's say instead of a hard limit of like 5 different ways that you could spend a coin, like now you can have 50
mm.
because you're just being way more efficient with that use of space on chain.
Okay. Um, so the okay. So sorry if I'm working through this as Neanderthally as I can, because I'm trying myself to understand it. Uh, okay, so the UTXOs, that's the point at which the source of the data. I mean, I'm I sound like an idiot, so anybody that's a technical person sitting here probably laughing. But I should make this show called Bitcoin Made Idiot. Um, because that would be more accurate. Um, uh, So the UTXOs, explain what that is, because that gets thrown around a lot, and I think I have like the vaguest idea, but I've just haven't done the research into it. But a lot of people probably get lost by something like that.
Well, it's just a coin that hasn't been spent yet. So like a transaction has like inputs, and then the outputs. So like the coins that are being spent and the new ones that are being created when that transaction is confirmed. A UTXO is just an unspent output. So it's that
Mm,
coin sitting around that is valid to spend but hasn't been spent yet.
okay. So now with Taproot, you you can have that coin sitting there with instructions on how it can be spent. Um, but all that data isn't living on chain, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
Hmm.
See, the funny thing is, I'll have to like re-listen to this, like, because I saw somebody put the Andy Dwyer meme of from Parks and Rec when he was like, I don't know what a taproot is, and at this point, I'm too embarrassed to ask. Um, I don't know if you ever saw that episode where
Hmm.
he was like listing a bunch of things for Ron Swanson that he's like never told anyone. He was like, I don't know who Al Gore is, and at this point, I'm too embarrassed to ask.
Hmm.
That's how I think a lot of people feel about Taproot, where it's like, what? Like, I know this is important. I know this helps us. Um, and amazingly, it was still difficult to get it processed, right? Like, it took a lot of effort to get it enabled.
Hmm.
I mean, how long has this been how long has Taproot been in the works?
Well, I mean, the specific implementation, um, like 2018, 2019, around there, like the individual pieces that actually came together to become Taproot, uh, back like 2011, 2012, 2013.
Wow. Wow. So and this is what how much work it takes. I was explaining to my business partners a little bit before this. Earlier today we were talking about they were asking me some questions about Bitcoin because obviously I convinced them to invest in Bitcoin. So they, come to me for questions and I'm like, I mean, I'll give you like the dumbest answer possible, but I'll point you in the right direction. Um, but I was like, for anything to change, it takes a very long time for anything to change in Bitcoin. And from what I understand, everybody was in favor of this, but it was like there was arguments over how to activate it, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
yes.
that was
So
I would say, in my opinion, that was mostly just PTSD from the 2017 activation of SegWit. And everybody on all sides of that argument, yeah, they just had a little shell shock from that. And kind
yeah,
of that led to nobody talking about how to activate the next thing since 2017 outside little like groups and clusters. And when everybody kind of sat down when Taproot was finished, like, how do we turn it on? Everybody realized like nobody agrees because everybody
no,
was just like traumatized and not talking about it the whole time.
it was one of those things that you just like ignore and ignore and ignore until it becomes, it's like a family type thing, where like families that don't communicate well, it's like, let's just go merrily along and not talk about the fact that this incredibly painful thing is going to come up and we have to confront it eventually. Um, so with the SegWit, I mean, that's what caused the block size war, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say caused it, but it was kind of the everything coming to a head.
Because what did SegWit do as far as an upgrade?
Pretty much what it did is it kind of tricked old nodes into accepting transactions without a signature. And then it moved that signature kind of outside of the block from the point of view of old nodes, to kind of One solves something called the transaction malleability problem, because when you have a Bitcoin transaction, the signature isn't really going, like, you're not signing the transaction itself, you're signing the hash of it. And so there was kind of this weird thing where, like, the hash would go over part of the signature, and there are like weird cryptographic games you could play where you would change the signature or like part of it, and that would change the hash that it's signing, but it would still be a valid signature. And so that could be used to break like any chain of transactions. Like, let's say you have things like Lightning, or like a long chain of transactions, like one after the other. If somebody malleated a transaction in that chain, then it would invalidate all of the transactions ahead of it and make them invalid, because the hash that they're referencing for the coins they're spending changed. So the hash that they're referencing for the past transaction wouldn't be valid anymore. And so by moving the signature completely outside of the block from the old node's point of view, like, it stopped hashing like that part of the transaction that allows you to do that. And it only hashed everything else, so that once you have a signature, you can't kind of change it and have it still be valid and play those kinds of games anymore. And so the whole reason for that was kind of so that we could have these second layer protocols where you're kind of chaining transactions together off chain, and remove that way that they could be attacked or disrupted. You know, like, imagine if you opened a Lightning channel, and then you have this pre-signed transaction to guarantee you can get your money back. But then somebody plays this game and they tweak the signature that's funding the Lightning channel so that the hash of that transaction is different. And then that transaction confirms. Now your pre-signed transaction to get your money back isn't valid anymore, because the past transaction that it's referencing was changed and it's not valid. And so, like, without SegWit, you couldn't really build all these off-chain things, because all it would take is one guy like grabbing a transaction out of the mempool and playing this game with it, and it would break like the other transactions that would make that second layer protocol work.
Okay. So then I guess the people that were against SegWit were just saying, were they the ones, the proponents for increasing the block size? And they were just saying, like, well, why would we? Because they're, I'm guessing, looking at it like, you don't need to do this second layer, just increase the block size, and then you can do everything that you want to do on the base chain.
That was pretty much their argument.
It's crazy too that, like, I mean, hats off to like people like you, Guy Swan, like all the other people that are OGs that have been in it for a long time and went through that. I mean, I'm sure there will be battles in the future, but I kind of fear what side I would have been on if I had been in Bitcoin at that point. Like, if I would have been able to fully grasp really the necessity of making the blockchain pure and simple, and and not, I mean, increasing the block size to how much it take, like 9 terabytes for a Ethereum node right now. Yeah,
I actually supported big blocks back in 2013. Like, the first attempt to do that, I was a supporter of it until I kind of started learning more and realized how idiotic that was.
And so your reason, I mean, what's your reason for what changed you? Just keeping it simple on the blockchain and not allowing people to run nodes in perpetuity without increasing the data requirements?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much just that realization that if like everybody has to go trust a big data center to know what all the balances are, then how is that any different from PayPal?
Yeah. Yeah, that's no different from the system that we currently live in. Um, so yeah, so the um, to get into that a little bit, we have out of control inflation. We have that is being underreported. Um,
Yep.
Manipulation of the money. Um, so obviously centralization doesn't work. Um, how do you think this unwinds?
I think it is going to be a giant shit show, and all of the big fiat currencies, the dollar, the yuan, the yen, the pound, like they're all going to just try to export their inflation. Like I think as the bigger Bitcoin grows and like less stable, smaller currencies start imploding on themselves, all of those big fiat currencies are going to try to swoop in and push their fiat currency in these places where local currencies are imploding. And it's going to just be a race to like try to dollarize or like poundize or whatever, like all of these different regions as Bitcoin keeps growing and like exacerbating problems with these more inflationary smaller currencies.
So you think to keep pushing their inflation out, um, kind of like people attack me for this, kind of like the yoga pants, like you got to push it somewhere. It's got like it's gonna go, it's gonna blob around somewhere.
Yep.
But you would keep it out of view of the United States and push it down to the ankle somewhere, and have that bulge out. I can't believe I'm making this example. um but um I don't know where that came from. So let's say somebody like Zimbabwe, that is the ankle where we have now a cankle of inflation.
We're going to get canceled.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I'm getting canceled big time for that one. Oh my god. So Zimbabwe is this cankle of inflation, and I'm trying to get it back on track here. And and so they're gonna push this inflation elsewhere, and so you have places like Zimbabwe that they got to pull it together and be like, all right, we're gonna be. I'm sorry, I can't stop thinking about the cankle of inflation. Oh, the so it's a race for them. It's a race for the dollar and other currencies to get there and dollarize them before Bitcoin takes over like it did in El Salvador.
Well, honestly, I would say that Bitcoin taking over in places like that would actually help dollarize them
It's true.
because Bitcoin taking over as a store of value, as a place to park your wealth, it's still not stable enough to price things in. Like it's still not stable enough to be a day-to-day unit of account. And so if you have Bitcoin kind of swoop in and dominate your economy as a store of value, as where people want to park their wealth, like you still need that unit of account, like that stable medium of exchange. And so if the process of Bitcoin coming in implodes your own currency, like that's a huge opportunity for a country like the US to come in and go, hey, have you heard about our Lord and Savior, the dollar?
Have you heard about this newfangled thing we got called the dollar? So they're gonna. So it might. Yeah, I guess that kind of might accelerate it. Because I mean, if El Salvador wasn't dollarized, they probably wouldn't have been able to do Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been a lot harder. Um, Makes the use case make sense for people. Um, yeah, it's just interesting. I'm curious to see. Like, I think you and I are in the same boat where people look at like they paint this rosy picture where like like Bitcoin's going to take over and it's just going to like we're going to move on like and all ride on like fluffy clouds like and go to like a Bitcoinized world. Um, and everything's going to be fine. But I think that these powers that be are going to kick and scream and drag this out and make this as painful as possible to switch over to a Bitcoin standard. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, massive paradigm shifts in society do not just happen smoothly and peacefully. They are violent, like disruptive and dangerous times. And whatever, I'll sound condescending. I think a lot of the people in this space who think it's just going to be like a rosy trip down Santa Monica Boulevard are deluded dumbasses. And they just have no clue what's going on.
I think there's just like this level of naivete, um, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that a lot of people still think like they haven't, I guess, fully woken up from the Matrix yet. You know, like they still think. I mean, there's still people that have like faith in their governments and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
and hats off to them. Anyone that's trying to get politicians to adopt Bitcoin, but I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see it working. Um,
At least
there,
not the way that we want it to.
yeah, which is why I mean, I've been advocating for people to in Laser Huddle's way of saying where he says, make the cost of tyranny, really expensive. Um, and I've been telling people all summer, like, get out of cities, and that's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm gone. Nobody will know where I'm living, but we're out, and we're gonna be. It's going to like they could shut down the world, and our life is gonna stay the same. My kids will still have
Mm-hmm.
space to run. They'll have space to get that almighty, that dangerous sunlight that that is gonna be kill everybody. Um, and they'll be able to get water without a public source, all that good stuff. That's where I mean, talk about my life changing from Bitcoin and the pandemic combined has it's like amazing. I mean, it's 18 months into this and here I am. Like I'm got my own water source and um you know, I'm trying to get my own meat source too. So it's be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, like
people
that's the goal. Like everybody in this space isn't going to be able to go all the way with this, but you should try to be getting as self-sufficient as possible, like with everything you can. Like that is what you do in turbulent times when society is about to flip on its head. Like stop acting like you can count on society to meet the necessities that you need to get by.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how many people even like people I know that are like maybe on the conservative side or like, very right wing or something, and they're still so dependent on the system. Um, and like it's like I'm like, wow, like one of my friends who like I would have thought would have been like the biggest, like out there like getting farmland and everything. And I asked him like what would he do for like a water reserve? And he was like, well, I have a swimming pool. And I'm like, yeah, but
Oh my
how
God.
how long is that gonna last? Like, if the water gets and it's just left in the system. It's kind of like in the movie The Big Short, whenever they all go to Ryan Gosling and are like flipping out, and he's like, "You still have a little bit of faith in the system, don't you? Like you still think that this isn't corrupt. You still think this isn't a house of cards that's going to fall apart." Um, and I don't know. I just look at it as like a storm. It's like you're getting in the storm shelter, and I think it's all based off of, the money. I think the money being the problem is what's causing this storm. Do you think? I mean, to put tinfoil hat on, and Luke, who's recently partnered with me on the podcast, uh, and he's doing his own show. But Luke from Spaces, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and one thing I didn't know is he said that there were all kinds of like riots and protests leading up like through 2018 and 2019. Um, And I didn't know that. And so he was like, put your tinfoil hat on, and what's a way to get everybody to stop moving around? What's a way to get people to stop spending money? Um,
Yep.
it's kind of interesting. It's a
I
little
mean, look at the
curious.
yellow vests in France. That was going on for like 2 solid years, I think, before 2020.
Really?
Hmm.
So what do you think this is all coming from? What's your craziest deep conspiracy theory idea of what's going on, Bitcoin and everything in the world conflated together?
China is waging World War III against the West right now. And everybody who has been sold out to China is just, hey, why do you think they want lockdowns? Why do you think they want our economy broken? Why do you think they keep defying all logic to keep doing these things? This is a war. Like, that's what's going on right now. Like, this is World War III. And it's just not clicking in people's head because they look back to the 1940s and they're like, but there aren't millions of troops storming North America or Europe. And it's like, no shit. That isn't how people fight wars anymore. It's the 21st century.
Yeah. Yeah, people think that's going to be kinetic war the way that it once was. Are going to be sorely disappointed because it's
Mm-hmm.
just not. Um, do you think the U.S. has what it takes to fight this off?
If we can get all of the communists out of positions of power in Washington, D.C., but who the hell knows what that will take?
And how do you tell which ones are and aren't?
Well, when
There's
you
some of them that are
have
bold.
deranged, I mean,
Go
dude,
ahead.
look at Biden's pick for what was it, the Treasury Office or the OCC? I forget, but the crazy communist lady, literally pushing the idea that the entire oil industry should be intentionally bankrupted, that nobody should have a bank account anymore, just get an account directly at the Fed. Um, our domestic oil industry, especially natural gas, was a huge play over the last decade to remove our dependence on foreign nations for our energy production. Like from 2010 to like a little before 2020, we went from a massive oil and natural gas importer to one of the biggest exporters in the world. And there's actually a few times OPEC and Saudi Arabia like ramped up production and drove the price down specifically to with our oil infrastructure that had higher break-even costs due to like the everything we're doing is fracking. Like it's a lot further along the lifetime of a well. It's a lot more resource intensive and costly to extract things from there. Like that is a war,
Mm-hmm.
like trying to subjugate us and prevent us from maintaining energy independence.
Hmm. So it's a war over energy. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have Bitcoin, which is a currency created by energy. It's kind of interesting.
Yep.
So is it, I mean, do you think that I think it sounds like Bitcoin derangement syndrome or like somebody that's too far down the rabbit hole. But I think that everything comes back to Bitcoin. Um, and what do you think, as far as the world goes, is Bitcoin the root of everything that we see? Something that takes away the power to print, manipulate money, um, and then also manipulate energy. Um, do you think that's what's causing is Bitcoin the thing that I'm trying to phrase this? Is Bitcoin the thing that ultimately fundamentally fixes the world?
It can be, but it won't just magically do that on its own. Like people have to align their incentives with it and actually act. But it won't just happen all on its own.
So how can people align their incentives better? The average pleb, that's just like, I bought some Bitcoin, I'm holding on to it, let's see what happens.
Keep buying. Like whatever skill you have, whatever you do for a living, hey, what can you do in this space? Like you're an HR person. Hey, guess what? All companies need an HR department past a certain point. Like you're an accountant, you're a finance person. Hey, guess what? All companies need a finance department. Like you don't have to be an autistic software engineer or a cryptographer to like find a job or something productive to do that is pushing things forward in this space. Like hell, all companies who deal with consumers, they need customer support specialists. Like there are things to do in this space. Look at your skill set and try to leverage that to get involved in this space, to actually help companies doing things make those things happen.
Almost like doing what you need to do to be a part of the war effort.
Yeah.
Actually, might write
Like
an
don't
article
ask
about
what
that.
Bitcoin can do for you. Ask what you can do for Bitcoin.
That's really good. I mean, it honestly is true. And we've talked about this before in spaces, but I mean, do you think the founding fathers would be Bitcoiners?
Yes, the vast majority of them, absolutely.
Not the ones that corrupted it within 2 years, but the ones that were
Yeah,
ready for
Hamilton
freedom.
can go himself.
To put it mildly, um, he would have probably loved ETH.
Yeah.
Um, so and then before we go, so I'll let you run here. I know we only scheduled for a little bit, but uh, what are your thoughts on all the God, the Twitter drama? I cannot keep up with this. I feel like I don't know if you noticed. I was just taking a step back because I'm like I don't even know what's going on. Like I get busy with something else, and then you come back to Bitcoin Twitter for like after like 3 day hiatus, and you're like, what in the? I don't even know what's going on anymore. New people were enemies. New people were friends. I'm like, what is going on? Um, yeah. How do you keep up? Do you just step away from that drama? I mean, it consumes some people, but I don't know how they do it.
I can't avoid seeing it,
That's
but
true.
it's this simple. Um, everybody is like regressing to high school,
Yeah.
and it's time to grow the up. And I say this as a prolific troll. Half the time I've been in this space, there is a difference between trolling and kind of being a little comical in making an actual like logical point, or in kind of goading somebody a little bit who won't acknowledge a rational point or reality, versus just completely childish high school bullshit. And almost all the drama I see is completely childish high school bullshit.
Yep.
Like yesterday, all of this Taproot is a scam and like arguing over smart contracts. Like it is the most childish shit on earth. Half of the people I see like bitching about this are the people constantly lying and misrepresenting things and making false equivalencies to try to shill broken shit coins and nonsense like that, misrepresenting things to like sucker people in with their money. And what they're doing is effectively trying to redefine the definition of a smart contract to exclude Bitcoin. Smart contract was a term coined by Nick Szabo in 1996. And the example, it's literally his definition is taking legal contracts and making them programmatically enforceable in a digital way. And a lot of the examples he gave were things like delineation of property rights. Hey, That's what a UTXO and basic Bitcoin transactions are. They are the delineation and transfer of property rights over a UTXO on the blockchain. Like a bonded contract. You know what that is? That's just putting money in a multi-sig with an escrow operator. That's a bonded contract. Like all of these very basic, he literally like used Swift and ACH as examples of like proto smart contracts, things that just transferred money around. He coined and invented that entire term and concept. And what's going on right now, because Bitcoin has a massive upgrade that drastically increases the flexibility of the smart contracts that Bitcoin can do, like the size of them and the scope of different conditions they can have. They are whining and throwing a hissy fit, going, that's not a smart contract because it's not some Turing complete gobbledygook nonsense like on Ethereum. And they are trying to redefine smart contracts to mean arbitrarily Turing complete bullshit like that. That's not what a smart contract is. That is a subclass of smart contracts. But something as basic as putting money in a 2 of 3 multisig on the Bitcoin blockchain as an escrow is also a smart contract. All it is taking legal contracts, like forms of legal contracts from the legacy world, and doing them programmatically so that they will automatically be enforced. Nothing about that says anything about Turing complete or it's got to do this fancy crap that Ethereum does. They're just trying to redefine terms and call people scammers because Bitcoin made a massive improvement. And it's completely high school drama bullshit. Like, people need to grow the up. People need to learn to have adult conversations about all the different systems in this space and the trade-offs and what they can and can't do, and stop playing these gimmicky games where we're going to redefine words every 5 seconds because that's the only way somebody can win an argument. Like, everybody just needs to grow the up.
I agree. I mean, because it's kind of like the dangers of, how it was like the taking the toxic toxic maximalist and trying to define it, and you just have to be careful with like redefining things. You can't change the definition of the word, you can't change the truth, but what you can do is influence how people feel. And yeah, I mean, I don't know Udi. Never talked to him before in my life. I've tried to like listen into a couple of space, and I just, I don't know. It's just so whiny. I can't listen to it. And I think, I think across the board, everybody just needs to like, you know, um, to grow up. Because the point to like going after log, I think was valid, and the point has been made, and I think it's kind of working itself out. But like don't give a platform to scammers, or at least give pushback. Like I'm a proponent for freedom of speech, so it's like give everybody a platform, but don't just sit there and let them say stuff and not challenge it. So I think that it's properly working, but also to the same point, it's like you just gotta move on at some point. You know what I mean? Like it's but yeah, like this stuff. Yeah, I saw that Taproot is a scam room, and I was like, my God, I can't even go in and listen. I was like, because I just know, I knew what it was going to be. I saw you were in there doing the fighting the good fight.
No, I actually wasn't. I'm blocked by Udi because I pointed out that he was technically incorrect about some comparison he made between an application built on Liquid versus an application built on Ethereum. So he blocked me for just calmly going, that was an incorrect statement.
As one does whenever they know how strong their arguments are, is to immediately block people. It's wild. Yeah, no, I agree with you. People need to grow up. And this is serious. This is real. This is real world stuff. This isn't a game. This isn't a drill. This is real. So, well, hey, dude, I'll let you run. If you want to have like a final send off, and we got to do this again. I apologize for running a little bit late. You know, your constitution
Oh, dude,
pushed us
doesn't
back, and
bother
then
me at all, man.
and then but I want to do this again, and I hate to rush you off, but I do have a hard out. Um, yeah, let's do this again and maybe pick up where we left off. Where we could talk about like fighting the good fight and all that kind of stuff. But where can people find you?
Brian_trolls with a Z on Twitter.
And is Brian your first name? I'm trying to dox you.
No, that's just the legacy hangover from when I started this account to troll Brian Armstrong, and then I just kept Brian.
I was curious as to where the origins of that came from, and I like trolling Brian Armstrong too because I think they're the enemy of Bitcoin. And as somebody with, as you can see if you're watching the video, I have a massive head, so I can say this as somebody with a massive head. That dude has the most bulbous head I've ever seen in the history of the world, and he makes me look like one of those. Do you remember in the old Mario Brothers movie that was like nothing like the real Mario Brothers game?
Oh my god, that was the greatest movie ever.
And do you remember the Goombas? How little their heads were? That's like what I look like compared to if I stand next to Brian Armstrong. So, but that's great to know that that's where Brian Trolls came from. Well, Shinobi, thanks so much for coming on, and let's definitely, I don't know, we'll try to book something like a month or so out, and we'll pick this conversation up where we left it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
thanks,
sounds good, man. I guess this is Mario, and I'm Luigi Mario. We're the Mario brothers.
Mario, and I'm Luigi Mario.